Aloha kako, everyone. If you're wondering about the Hawaiian shirt and the Hawaiian greeting, this particular assignment was completed while I was on Oahu in Honolulu. I thought about taping it on Waikiki Beach, but I decided I'd wait until I got back here. If you'll remember, a couple of weeks ago we talked about implementing a department chair structure, and so now it's time to talk about how we're going to measure the effectiveness of that structure upon its implementation. So we're going to immediately start off with assessments at the end of each academic year. And so very importantly, we're certainly going to do a minimum of 3 years of assessment. So we'll, at the end of academic year 1, we'll do an assessment. At the end of academic year 2, assess it again. At the end of academic year 3, assess it again. That may be ongoing. It might not be that frequent. That'll be something that we'll determine as we go forward in determining the successes and the things that we need to work on within the new structure. So the initial time period is a 3-year period right off the bat that is annual. Okay, and then how the assessments are going to happen is we're going to use essentially at the moment we use SurveyMonkey to do all of our surveys that institutional research then utilizes to compile all the information. So we're going to use an online survey that will be sent out to all of the stakeholders at the end of each academic year, and we'll be providing all stakeholders 2 weeks to complete the survey. Okay, so the survey will be ready by the end of the first academic year. We'll send it out to everybody, and then we'll collect that data. So using SurveyMonkey is how it's going to be essentially sent to you. And this is important because if you'll remember in our text by Duffy, it talks about a change leader assesses the outcomes of a systemic transformational change. So we certainly don't want to implement a change and then not know whether or not it's successful and not know if it's just simply by how people feel about it. We want some hard data as well as anecdotal data. On the next slide, we talk specifically about the data collection. So it will be collected at the end of that 2-week period. It will be compiled, and it will be analyzed by institutional research during the summer session. So they're going to determine whether or not it's working out excellently, whether or not it's working out good or going well, and or whether or not we need to modify certain components of the change, or change components, or discontinue certain aspects of it altogether. Those will be things that we'll be looking at when we collect the data from the surveys. Okay, so we're going to look and see if it's really doing really well, if it's doing okay, and or if there needs to be modifications or discontinuations. Okay, the stakeholders that are involved in this for this initial 3 years are faculty members, because faculty, you're going to all be in a department. Staff, so that means staff members that are in academic departments like the English department or the World Languages department or Maths and Sciences, all faculty member, all staff. Not only staff though in those departments, those specific departments that are academic, the staff will also be in financial aid, the administration's staff that help keep things running, human resources. Those essentially, they're affected by the department chair structure as well. And so all classified staff on campus will be part of the stakeholders. All the people who have become the department chairs are stakeholders, and all the administrators. So when we talk about administrators, we mean the directors on campus, the deans on campus, the vice presidents, and the president of the college. So really, essentially, it's mostly everyone who has some version of a permanent position on campus. But when I say permanent, I actually go back to faculty includes adjunct faculty, which we know are semester to semester. So full-time tenured and adjunct faculty, all staff that are not student workers. Okay, you have to be staff, classified staff, and then the chairs themselves and the administrators are all part of the stakeholders who will be surveyed to collect the data that will help us understand whether or not how the implementation of the department chair structure is going. Okay, so if you'll remember, 3 of the points that really came up in the first presentation, specifically about what the department chairs would be able to help enhance and why the structure is being implemented, were improved communication. So the survey questions will be geared towards understanding how communication is flowing. If you'll remember, we talked about faculty being able to talk directly to a department chair who can then convey that to their concerns or interests or ideas to the dean. And so that should help some flow of communication, because the deans are a little hard to access. And then also things from administration that comes down to the workforce, faculty and staff, and we want to make sure that we want to see how the communication is improving, if it is. We want to see if there are improvements in scheduling. So related to scheduling, are rooms being used efficiently? Are days and times for courses scheduled in such a way that students have great access to them? Some of this lends itself to seeing an enhancement in FTES, full-time equivalent students. And then we also want to evaluate the organizational effectiveness. So by having department chairs, have things gotten smoother, have things gotten more cumbersome, and this is in issues like day-to-day running of the organization. Okay, so there will be questions in the survey that lend directly to those 3 criterion, so that we're able to determine, the college is able to determine whether or not the implementation of the department chair structure is effective. The target outcomes, so in this case, each of the 3 areas have a little bit different outcome targets. And so in the form of communication, in the area of communication, the target for success in year 1 is a 70% satisfaction, meaning that the college wants to hear that 70% of the people who are being surveyed find that the communication is effective in the way that the department chair structure has been implemented, and how the structure is currently working with being able to go to a department chair to share concerns and ideas. So year 1 is a 70% satisfaction, year 2 is an 80% satisfaction, and year 3 is a 90% satisfaction. And so those outcomes will hopefully be able to determine that in the surveys, and increasing the target base each year provides us for some growth and improvement. And what we are working towards is perceived stress at work. We want to see that that's sort of lessening. So if you'll remember, in an article. I'm stepping off camera. If you'll remember, in an article called Attitudes Towards Organizational Change Among Public Middle Managers, right, which is department chairs, change can be a challenge to implement. We want to make sure everybody's kind of on board as the institution is going forward. And so according to that article, we understand that perceived stress at work can negatively affect attitudes towards change. And so we're going to, within the survey, see how the stress level is being perceived. And that's why we're starting off with a 70% satisfaction, because, I mean, you know, you can't please everyone all the time, but we do want to have the majority of people satisfied in how communication is flowing. So 70% in year 1, 80% satisfaction in year 2, and 90% satisfaction in year 3. And then we'll see how that satisfaction rate is going as we go forward. We'll make adjustments as needed, because all outcomes, after we assess them, we determine how to adjust. Because it could be that right off the bat everyone's at 80%, and maybe we want to set a year 2 target for 85%. You know what I mean? So we're going to be looking at, the college is going to be looking at the stakeholders' perceptions of communication, and we're looking for year 1 a 70% satisfaction rate. The scheduling has a different numbering as far as the satisfaction rate there. So in the area of scheduling for the target for the outcomes in year 1 is an 85% score or satisfaction. Year 2 is 90%, and year 3 is 95%. So I spoke just a few minutes ago about some of the ideas that are going to be involved. So we're going to be looking at, the college is going to be looking at room efficiency, student access to courses, other scheduling components that can lead to increased FTES, because as we all know, the state has targets for growth for every college campus, and we want to make sure that we're meeting our targets, and one way to meet targets is to make sure that scheduling is efficient. So we'll be, the college will be looking at that as we go forward. And so also you'll notice that we're looking at a vertical growth. And so if you remember the YouTube video that was called Measuring Progress and Creating Continuous Systems of Improvement from 2009, and this was a stakeholders forum that's on YouTube, and they discussed vertical growth. And so what we're looking at, even though we're not specifically talking about FTES only, we're also talking about room efficiency, making sure scheduling is efficient so that classes are start and stop at logical times, rooms are utilized in ways that don't have large numbers of time blocks that are where the room is not being utilized efficiently. So the vertical growth here is 85 to 90 to 95% in efficiency to also help us see student growth in numbers. All right, and the next slide talks about the target outcomes for organizational effectiveness. And in the area of organizational effectiveness, year 1, 70% satisfaction, year 2, 80% satisfaction, year 3, 90% satisfaction. So those numbers are also in line with the communication. And what we're looking at is, if you'll also remember on that same YouTube video, the Measuring Progress and Creating Continuous Systems of Improvement, they talked about norms. And so some of this is anecdotal norms, your observations of how the organization is working. Is the workflow flowing through correctly in a good way? Is it bogging up somewhere where people aren't able to get things done? Are there snags, places that prevent a process from going forward? So in organizational effectiveness, we're going to be looking at specific data that will be identified, as well as anecdotal perceptions of, are the working conditions improved and enhanced? Okay, and then related to recognition and celebration, in this aspect, we're really, because we're a public institution and we can't spend a ton of money on quote-unquote parties, right? We want to come out to you for your ideas. So over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be asking the stakeholders to send in some ideas of ways that we can recognize and celebrate the success of the implementation of the department chair structure. So it could be that we recognize various departments with awards. It could be that we recognize chairs with awards. If you have other ideas that we're open to, we being the college, is open to hearing from you about ideas that are not overly costly, but that we can do as a school to celebrate the success, assuming we reach these goals. And we the college, I keep saying we the college, has been having some discussion with the foundation office, because the foundation may have some money that it can contribute to some kind of a recognition day or celebration luncheon or something, depending on the ideas that come forth from you about how we can recognize this new change to the school, which is implementing department chairs, and make sure that if we're hitting our targets and that it's going well, that we all are able to feel good about it and know that this particular change was a good change. Okay, so if you have any questions, you can certainly contact me. Remember, the video is on YouTube. It is called Measuring Progress and Creating Continuous Systems of Improvement. And this was it's an hour or so long. It was the stakeholders forum back in 2009. The article is called Attitudes Towards Organizational Change Among Public Middle Managers. And as always, I'm running off screen, our textbook, Dream, Create, and Sustain, are 3 great resources for you to take advantage of to help you know a little bit more about measurements, change, outcomes, etc. in the post-secondary setting. So mahalo nui for tuning in. I hope you are raring to go forward with this, and aloha.